Again, a welcome as we continue our Advent journey that I feel has been a good one thus far, that we are reminded again of being in the right place as where God would have us, being a child of God. This particular Sunday, traditionally known as Gaudete Sunday, a time in which we lift up a little sharper focus around joy. Advent traditionally tending to be a little more on the somber side, calling us to prayer. Reflection, this particular Sunday has always been a time to lift up the possibility of joy in our life. Also, the readings have a strong focus around discipleship. So I want us to think about those two realities in our life, where we are with being called to be of service in the world and where we are with joy. When I was in graduate school, I lived in Hyde Park in the south side of Chicago. When graduation day came, the ceremonies were held on the campus of the University of Chicago in the Rockefeller Chapel, which if any of you have ever seen, it's an incredibly large and very, very gorgeous building, built by a really rich man. Stunningly beautiful, but my memories of the South Side are not so much of that church. By the way, I sort of did the math on this. When I was a student in Hyde Park, Michelle Obama was probably about 10 years old, also living on the south side of Chicago. So not that the Rockefeller Chapel is so much on my memory list, but there is a church that is also located on the south side of Chicago. And it is the traditionally, historically African-American St. Sabina's Roman Catholic Church. Again, as I mentioned, also on the south side. You could not miss the huge, imposing plaque that was placed above the doorway with this challenge. Discipleship will cost you. Are you willing? Are you willing? I would suggest that these words are a fine summary of today's gospel. These words are indeed worthy of our own serious consideration as we prepare to celebrate the one who calls each of us to a life of mature discipleship. At the same time, we rely on the example of the one, this Jesus, who has gone before us and has provided an example of living a life of unconditional love. We are also gifted with a spiritual community that, as we have heard so beautifully today, embraces all who come. So we are gifted with this faith community. We are also gifted with the spiritual resources to fulfill a life of peace and justice, no matter what we perceive the cost. We are called to discipleship. On this third Sunday of Advent, we are reminded that this is it's not a call to a faith journey that was ever meant to be one of misery, nor was it meant to be grindingly painful, nor was our faith journey ever meant to be a journey of self-deprecation. But we are reminded it's always a journey of joy, whether we're able to perceive that at any given time or not. We hear that clearly in that second reading. To rejoice in the Lord always. St. Paul provides a series of ethical admonitions that rest especially on the view of Christ and Christ's coming. The church's highlights the importance of joy as a dimension of discipleship. A life call to joy. Not to only give joy, a nod only on one weekend of the liturgical year, but to be very aware of joy on a daily basis. Easier said than done. I think about our national journey and our political landscape as it hits us between the eyes every day. Our political landscape is certainly not currently a journey wrapped with immense amounts of joy. Also, our church has not always, nor is it today, continues to be always a journey of joy and acceptance. Historically, it has drawn more to the rule book. We all have too often, we have all too often seen the ethical or moral dimensions of our faith as a set of limits and demands that oftentimes seem to take away all the fun out of living. Leaves us to live a life limited by rigidness and to be a bit obsessed with doing everything perfectly. How many of our more seasoned members here remember their early religious education and ever coming away with a sense of self-love, or being encouraged to think about joy as the cornerstone of your life? That experience in your faith where you feel that sinking feeling, where you feel you're never quite enough. And the remnants of that continue to hang on. I was present recently at a meeting where there were, I would say, predominantly seasoned Catholics, mid-age to older. And I was struck by, in that particular gathering, I heard the phrase, "burn in hell," 4 times. Not once, not twice, 4 times I heard the phrase, "burn in hell," which tells me that the religious ed years ago definitely hit its target. that continues to waft on in our consciousness. We have not retired that notion. And until we do, joy sometimes can seem quite elusive. Daniel Maguire, who is a renowned moralist, writes that joy is in fact a moral mandate. In Maguire's writings, he opens by citing a very famous Jewish saying, and I quote, "We," that's you and I, "will have to give an account on the judgment day of every good thing which we refused to enjoy when we might have done so." Woe is right. Woe is right. To give an accounting for everything that could have given us joy that we refused to embrace. Think about that. Maguire continues, and rightfully so, to assert that joy is the consummation of morality. The choice of joy is a normative standard by which to measure morality. It sets the course for one's personal behavior. If you are rooted in joy, it will affect how you behave in this world. But it also gives a direction to our politics, to our sense of economics, to our societal relations, and also how we care for our Mother Earth. If joy is what ought to be, then it enters the precincts of our social consciousness, that we actually invite joy to be the cornerstone of our conscience. And if we do that, we are then brought to a place where we can be courageous as prophets. We can be courageous because we are justice-based, and we can be hopeful. Healthy joy cannot be full while some of our brothers and sisters are in misery. It's hard to embrace joy when we gather today remembering a 7-year-old girl who had not had enough to drink, had not had enough to eat, and died on our border. That's the challenge. That's the challenge. Every one of us are continuously making choices, implicitly or explicitly, between joy and misery, or somewhere along that continuum. The standard simple test question: is the glass half full? Is the glass half empty? I've heard some say the glass is half empty and what's left in it is probably poison. No joy in Mudville there. The results of our choices are massive. Our gospel today provides us with a bit of clarity in being able to see the truth concerning the difference of opting for joy as our standard of morality. John the Baptist challenges his audience to actions that will make life more joyful for some. As he says, if you are on the margins, if you have 2 coats, give one away. That's good news to those who live on the margins. If you have a sandwich, share your sandwich. If you live on the margins, that's good news. For those who are perpetrators of injustice, it's not such good news. As the tax collector says, "What should I do?" And John the Baptist says, "You're taxing too heavily." For the soldier, "What should I do?" John the Baptist says, "Do not extort anybody." In short, don't be a bully. There is one example, if all of us think about what is it that we can do. And everyone has that possibility. There is one thing that is staring us right smack dab in the face that we can do, that is a form of discipleship. It's how we choose to care for our Mother Earth. If we fail to care for or to heal the mothership that we're trying to live on, it really won't matter in the end. For the past 2 weeks, the 24th Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change have been meeting in Poland. The conference is the main body that makes choices at the convention that also garners international cooperation toward tackling the impacts of climate change. Representing the Holy See at this high-level meeting was the Vatican's Secretary of State. And I quote him, "It is becoming clear that climate change is more of a moral issue rather than a technical issue." Pope Francis has also indicated, and I quote, "Strategies for a solution demand an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time, protecting nature." Discipleship's going to cost you. Are you willing to pay? We're called to a life of joy. I close with this reading from Richard Rohr. "I have come to realize that those who make space for joy, those who prefer nothing to joy, those who desire the utter reality, will most assuredly have it. We must not be afraid to announce it to refugees, to slum dwellers, to saddened prisoners, to angry prophets. Now and then, we must even announce it to ourselves. In this prison of now, in this cynical and sophisticated age, someone must believe in joy. Amen.